It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I finally decided to tackle the home repairs I had been putting off for months. The little things had been piling up: door hinges squeaking, the kitchen faucet dripping every 5 seconds, and a cabinet door in the pantry that had been hanging by one hinge for weeks. I didn't have the tools or the patience to fix them myself, so I reached out to a local handyman service. That's when I met Daniel, a 25-year-old handyman with a warm smile, rolled-up sleeves, and a knack for making even the most complicated repairs seem easy. When he arrived at my house, I was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through my tablet. I could hear the knock on the door before I saw him. I stood up, opened the door, and there he was, tall, friendly, and carrying a toolbox that looked heavier than it should have been. "Hi, I'm Daniel. You called for some repairs," he said. I nodded and invited him in, pointing out the areas that needed work. He took a quick look around, jotting notes in a small pad he carried in his pocket. He started in the kitchen, tightening the faucet and replacing a worn-out washer. As I sat on the sofa nearby, I couldn't help but notice how efficient and focused he was. Every now and then, he'd ask me a quick question about how long the problem had been going on, or if I preferred a certain fix over another. His tone was professional but friendly, and it put me at ease. While Daniel worked, I offered him some iced tea. He smiled, took a short break, and we chatted for a few minutes about his work. He told me he had been fixing things since he was a teenager, learning from his grandfather who owned a small repair shop. He loved the problem-solving aspect of the job, and I could tell he took pride in doing things right. I told him about my own career in graphic design, and we laughed over how we both had jobs that required patience and attention to detail. When he moved on to the squeaky door hinges, he brought his toolkit into the living room. I was still on the sofa, watching him work from a distance. "It's just the screws being a little loose," he explained. "Once I tighten them and add some oil, it'll be as quiet as new." I appreciated how he explained each step. He didn't just fix things, he wanted me to understand what he was doing so I could take better care of my home in the future. Halfway through the repairs, he ran into a stubborn problem with the pantry door. The screws were stripped, and the frame had shifted slightly over time. He sat down on the floor to get a better angle, laying out his tools neatly. As I watched, I realized that part of the reason I felt so relaxed was his calm energy. He never rushed, never got frustrated, and treated every part of the job like it mattered. At one point, I offered to help by holding the door steady while he adjusted the hinges. We both laughed when I realized how heavy it actually was. "Don't worry," he said, "I've got it." In no time, the door was aligned perfectly again. I tested it, and it swung open and closed without a single squeak. After finishing the indoor repairs, Daniel stepped outside to check the back gate, which had been sticking. I followed him out, and we walked through the small garden I had been tending over the summer. He noticed the roses in bloom and asked about the variety. I told him how my grandmother had planted the first bush years ago, and I had been adding more each year. It felt nice to share a piece of my home's history with someone who seemed genuinely interested. By the time Daniel packed up his tools, the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky. The repairs were done, my house felt refreshed, and I was grateful for his hard work. I thanked him and handed him the payment. "You've made my week a lot easier," I said. He smiled and replied, "Glad I could help. That's what I'm here for." As he left, I realized that the whole afternoon had been more than just about fixing broken things. It was a reminder that sometimes the simplest interactions, a friendly conversation, a job well done, can brighten your day. Sitting back on my sofa, I looked around at the now quiet hinges, the fixed faucet, and the perfectly aligned pantry door. My home felt a little more in order, and so did I. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about how rare it is to meet someone who approaches their work with such genuine care. Daniel had not only fixed the things I'd been putting off, but he'd also brought a sense of calm and positivity into my space. I decided I'd call him again the next time something needed fixing, not just because he was good at what he did, but because some people leave a good impression long after they've left. Weeks later, when a storm knocked part of my fence loose, I didn't even think twice before calling him again. When he showed up, toolbox in hand and that same friendly smile, it felt almost like catching up with an old friend. And once again, while I sat on the sofa watching him work, I realized that sometimes, The people who help you fix your home also help you appreciate it a little more.